I get the feel she getting naughty. We be going back and forth like walkie-talkie. It's a game she likes, so take my time. She got that Gucci, got that off-white. She on the table dancing all night. I saw the sign, yeah, she the bad type. Doing what she likes, yeah, that's just my type. You burn like fire. Let's make it harder. Baby, can we play with danger? Baby, can we play with danger?
Like the way you do to me. Passenger side when you ride with me. Baby, you can do what you want. It's the game I like. You can take your time, yeah. You burn like fire. Yeah, you burning like fire. Let's make it harder. Baby, can we play with danger?
Danger. Baby, can we play with danger? Baby, can we play with danger? Girl so bad, call 911. Stole my heart, now she's on the run. I just wanna slide, got me saying, baby, can we play with danger? The girl is so bad, call 911. Stole my heart, now she's on the run. I just wanna slide, got me saying, baby, can we play with danger? Baby, can we play with danger? Baby, can we play with danger?
First from around the world. MYX is Mix Radio. Mix Radio.
Baby, you got it. Everything and anything I've ever wanted. Can't even control it. My heart picks up the pace. Might get a little red in the face. I want you right here next to me. I think to myself, why can't you see? I can give you this loving. As long as you want it, show me something. Cube shot is ill, but he only got me. Give you all I got, no, I feel like can hardly breathe. Wonder if you notice, baby, can you feel my breeze? Always on my mind, wish I can give you everything that you want. You deserve it for sure. Breakfast and I love watching you grow. This feeling so strong makes me want it more. Don't give 'em now, we got so much in store. 'Cause you got it, everything and anything I've ever wanted. Can't even control it. My heart picks up the pace, might get a little red in the face. I want you right here next to me. I think to myself, why can't you see? I can give you this loving. As long as you want it, show me something. The world seems so much brighter ever since I met you. I can see my future whenever I see you. Everything ain't perfect, but for you the risk is worth it. You remind me of my purpose, always working towards a better me. And I will celebrate.
All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Philippine Now, a webinar co-presented by AVC and MYX. My name is Joycelyn David, and I will be your host and moderator for today's session. I can see a lot of people starting to pile into the room, so get comfortable. Pull up a chair with maybe your favorite drink. It's lunchtime in some parts of the world, but it's also morning for our moderators who are dialing in from the West Coast. So I'd like to kick it off by formally welcoming Marlino and Roslyn. Quick introduction to both of them as we dive in for today's webinar on the Filipino millennial audience. And we're so pleased today to have these two prestigious and very well-respected leaders in Filipino media, content, and creative industries. So up first, we have Marlino Bitanga. Marlino is the head of operations and production for MYX Global. Based in beautiful San Diego, California. He is also the founder and host of Heavy Rotation, which is the first and only global podcast and music show for Filipino hip hop and R&B. We heard a little bit of that in the waiting room earlier. Known within the industry as a visionary, creative, and bold thinker, Marlino is a driver for purpose-centric brands and organizations who are committed to making a difference for others. Marlino, seriously, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Joycelyn. Excited to be here.
Yes. All right, and up on the right, we have Roslyn Alba Covarrubias. Roslyn, I had not met until this webinar, but your reputation precedes you. You've got an amazing resume. Please allow everybody to take all this in. Roslyn has produced live concerts, editorial programs, and commercials with some major artists like Justin Timberlake, JT, as well as Jay-Z, Rihanna, Bruno Mars, Canadian Justin Bieber, Drake, and our beloved Manny Pacquiao. She's also worked with brands in North America like AT&T, Budweiser, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's. Roslyn led the music team that helped launch MySpace.com and MySpace Music, which was one of the former #1 websites in the world. And after an inspirational trip to the Philippines, Roslyn, along with other celebrities, APL Diap of Black Eyed Peas and Filipino-American comedian Joe Coy, she teamed up with ABS-CBN, the largest Filipino media company in the world, in 2019. And while there, Roslyn helped market Filipino talent like Inigo Pascual and Keanu Valenciano, and she was instrumental in the relaunch of MYX, which is a global platform producing original content for Filipino millennial audiences. And she's produced events with NBA Clippers, Sacramento Kings, and all around an amazing track record. I feel like to talk all day about your accomplishments. I'm fangirling over here in Toronto. Roslyn, welcome to the stage today.
Thank you so much, Joycelyn. Thank you for putting this amazing event together. And I can't wait to come back to Toronto, one of my favorite places ever.
Awesome. Well, we'd love to see you back here, both here, as soon as the pandemic is allowing us to travel cross-border again. And for those of you just joining us, you're tuning into Philippine Now, our webinar to talk about Philippine millennial audiences and how best to connect and reach them. I'm your host for today, Joycelyn. I am the owner and CEO of AVC, AV Communications. We're a multicultural agency based in Toronto, serving clients all over the world. And our mission is to bring the diverse voices to life. And today, I'm biased, we're helping to bring the voices of Filipino audiences to life. And that is my background. And the colors in my logo are actually a reference to my Filipino heritage as well. So just a little fun fact to share as we kick off and talk a little bit about the Filipino market. But we'd like to start off with a fun poll. So all of you out there in webinar land, I can see you out there. We're going to activate a poll. And I encourage you to jump in and answer this question. How many Filipinos do you think are in North America? We're not going to ask you for a breakdown by country here. This isn't school, but it's a poll, and we'd love to see how many of you guessed correctly. Look at that. Most of you have gotten the answer correct. Almost 62% of you guessed correct. The answer is 5 million, okay? The population in the US is approximately 4 million, and in Canada is 1 million. Now, those numbers are some of the numbers that we're going to dive into before we jump over into the mixed content. So let's take a look at the US first. This is the bigger population group. As I said, about 4 million in the US. And as you can see on this page, the community of Filipino-Americans is quite diverse. On the left, we have foreign-born Filipinos and first-generation Filipinos. These are, the groups that have traditionally immigrated from the Philippines. They're coming to fill labor needs and jobs. And they currently, first-generation Filipinos represent more than 50% of Filipinos living in the US. So that's a very large group. On the right, we have US-born Filipinos who identify as Americans and second-generation Filipinos who are children of immigrants born in the US. What is important to note here is that this does not necessarily reflect mixed Filipino families. As you can see the pictures here, a lot of Filipino families are mixed and a lot of Filipino families are multicultural and diverse. So the numbers we feel sometimes are only representative of those who report as Filipino in the census. So definitely wonderful community, very rich and vibrant. And as reflected by both Rosalind and Marlino, who are coming from the West Coast of the US, the communities are very spread out from West Coast and East Coast as well. So very, very interesting community, and one that, again, 4 million strong, is fast growing and representative of the diversity in the United States. Now we go a little bit north of the border. Let me take you north to where I'm based today, is Toronto, Ontario. Canada's population will peak about 1 million, and this is the projected numbers from the Philippine-Canadian Embassy. On the left, very similar to what we saw in the US, we have temporary residents and workers, as well as first-generation Filipinos. What's interesting to note is that in Canada, the Philippines was, up until the pandemic, one of the fastest growing immigrant groups in all of Canada, surpassing South Asian and Chinese population in terms of numbers. So a lot of this is due to Canada's fairly low population compared to the US. The entire population is like the state of California. Marlino, Rosalind, like all of Canada could fit in California. So our need for immigration is very much high to fill labor need. And so that is a unique trend, I think, to Canada, given our low population. On the right, our Filipino-Canadian audiences are Canadian-born, as well of mixed ancestry, and second-generation born, as myself as an example, born to Filipino-Canadian parents. So that's just a quick snapshot of the audience, the population size. We're going to dive a little bit more into the segments on the right today. Those that are Canadian-born or American-born, as well as second-generation. Because this is the audience that Mix and Rosalind and Marlino live in every day, and obviously they'll take us through what is unique about these audiences and how you as a brand or media agency can tap into them. But before that, one more poll, because we love polls. I'm just gonna get this poll going. Are you ready for a pop culture poll? Here you go. I'm gonna relaunch it and stay tuned. The poll is simply one question: which of the following celebrities are not of Filipino heritage? Oh, look at those answers piling in. Wow, everybody knows their pop culture. Okay, we'll give it another 10 seconds. All right. Oh, wow, that was fast. Excellent. Okay, so most of you got that one correct. The answer is Beyonce. Beyonce is not of Filipino heritage, but Bruno Mars, Rob Schneider, Jo Koy, and her, all award-winning in many in each of their industries, are of Filipino heritage, and many of them proudly talking about their heritage. So to kick off, the mixed conversation, we thought it was important to also share some insights about what drive Filipino pop culture and Filipino culture. So we'll take you through a couple of points here, and then I'll turn it over to Marlino, who will take you through Mix and their audience and content platforms. The first thing we'd like you to know about Filipino audiences is that pop and celebrity culture is very important to our culture. Whether you're first generation or second generation, as you saw with the poll earlier, there's a lot of famous Filipino or half Filipino celebrities who help drive and fuel this as well. In the middle, on the top row, is another important point, multi-generational households. This is kind of commonly known for any Filipino family, but grandma and parents and grandchildren all live generally together in one communal multi-generational home, or if not in the same home, very close to each other. And I feel like this is something that drives purchase decisions, both big and small, and obviously means that for brands, you're talking about larger households and obviously larger basket sizes as well. On the top right is a stat that I know Filipinos have claimed for at least the last 6 years. According to the We Are Social Global report, Filipinos globally top in terms of usage on Facebook. I think the F in Facebook should mean Filipino because there's such high users of the platform. So that's definitely an insight that is good for our audience to know. And when we dive a little bit deeper and look at purchase behavior, or the two on the bottom, high expendable income and generally being bargain hunters, this is a direct relation to having larger households. Stretching dollars, is important. Bargain hunting is an aspect of our culture that you'll see. For those of you in retail, generally buying smaller or more frequent or being value conscious is definitely a driver. However, it doesn't mean that they don't have money to spend. And in both Canada and in the US, various studies have shown Filipino audiences to have high disposable income, so much so that they're sending $1 billion in remittances just from Canada alone per year, in addition, to having a high expendable income versus Gen Pop markets. So something that we'll hear a little bit more about as we dive in. But the last piece to lead towards mix is on the bottom right. Filipino culture is the original fusion culture. And you'll hear Rosalind and Marlino talk about this hybridized and hyphenated identity. I'm Filipino-Canadian, I'm Filipino-Canadian, Ukrainian, Chinese. You'll hear these kind of descriptions within the communities. Now, what does that mean? It means that, the aspects of how you can connect with Filipino audiences is quite broad and obviously very, very diverse. And so with that, we are going to turn it over to the mix team, and we'll just play a short clip to turn it over to Marlene.
It's time to bring the bass back.
Mix is the beat of our culture. Our stories.
So I see myself having a couple number one albums.
Spotlighting inspiring content from Generation Mix. The next generation of creators, artists, and filmmakers. Our music. Discover fresh artists first from around the world. Uniquely Filipino.
It's hard to get this energy anywhere else.
Mix is the beat of our culture. All right, good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and switch and share my screen here. And while I'm doing that, if you could do us a favor and go ahead and type in the chat where you are tuning in from. We'd love to see who is here and where you guys are watching from. So if you guys can do that, that would be great. So as we mentioned, welcome to Philippine Now, the webinar with AVC and MYX. And to close out Filipino Heritage Month here in Canada, we're going to share why brands should tune in to the young Filipino audience. And as we mentioned earlier, my name is Marlino, and I am the OIC and Head of Operations and Production here at MYX. And I want to introduce, of course, my colleague Rosalind, who is our lead producer and talent relations at MYX. And today, you're going to get a better understanding of a young Filipino audience. We'll introduce you to MYX and our 360 brand platform, And you'll get to see some of the ways we are collaborating and with other brands and agencies and empowering our community. And if you have a question during our presentation, please feel free to enter it in the chat and we'll save it for our discussion at the end of the presentation. And so let's go ahead and get things started here. How do you define Filipino culture? We believe Filipino culture is a fusion culture. We're a mixed culture that embraces all other cultures. But how did we get here? Many Filipinos outside of the Philippines experienced a kind of social invisibility stemming from Spanish rule for over 300 years, plus over 40 years of US colonialism. So Filipinos look Asian, but they have Spanish last names. Most Filipinos who arrived here in the US, they knew how to speak English because it was an official language in the Philippines. So as a result, many Filipinos are mistaken as having other racial and ethnic backgrounds. But Filipinos have embraced fusion culture long before it was even a trend to do so. And today, a new generation of Filipino-Americans are making their mark and striving to define what Filipino culture means to them and how it is celebrated and portrayed. So Generation Mix, this is what we call them. It's a mix of Gen X and Millennial Filipinos. They are a fusion of cultures, embracing other cultures. Now more than ever, they are looking for areas of representation rather than a generation of assimilation. 100% Filipino, 100% American, Canadian. They shop, they order food, they watch content from their mobile devices. They demand for diversity and representation in the content that they watch and the brands that they support. And they'd rather spend on experiences like concerts, restaurants, and film festivals rather than material items. And so social media stars and influencers are the new celebrities for Generation Mix. With the rise of social media and YouTube influencers, we've seen the emergence of new Filipino talent that is now taking ownership over their own narratives around how a Filipino celebrity can look and act. You know, as Filipinos, we are wired and hardwired even to express ourselves, and social media has allowed us to socially be visible. And how are we doing this? We're doing this right now through arts and culture. Through arts and culture, Filipinos are making their mark in every aspect of pop culture and receiving recognition on the global stage. So this is what a Filipino sphere of influence looks like. It's basically the Filipino cultural diaspora is actively shaping today's global culture on every front, directly and indirectly. And never before has our reach of Filipino culture been so vibrant and impactful. From mainstream celebrities to talent in every industry imaginable and genre, we're basically being a huge part in what's happening in mainstream culture. So you look at it from music, you know, you have Bruno Mars, Apple, Sweetie, Black Eyed Peas. With film, TV, and media, you have Shay, you have Jokoi, writers like Mia Alvar and Elaine Castillo. From beauty and fashion, of course, we have Bretman Rock, Leanne V, Kim Cam Jones. And in sports, Jordan Clarkson, Tim Lincecum. On the dance side, Jabberwockies. And in Canada specifically, August Rigo and also Darren Esponto. But we can't forget the connection of the hip hop culture as well. So when it comes to young Filipinos, it's very important to discuss the role of hip hop and its connection to the Filipino culture. For African and Latino Americans, hip hop started as a movement and an outlet for a voice for disenfranchised youth and of marginalized backgrounds in low-income areas, as the hip hop culture reflected the social, economic, and political realities of their lives. Similarly, hip hop provided the same for Filipino, especially when it came to identity. Filipino identity has been connected to hip hop culture for many years, especially through music. So during the 20th century, many Filipinos who immigrated here in the States, they would all trade music back and forth between the States and the Philippines. Those things would be like rap albums, tapes, CDs, disco, funk, all of that stuff circulated between the US and the Philippines. In addition, Filipino-Americans became one of the first people to experiment with mobile DJ crews in the 70s and in the 80s. And here's a quote from an author, Laquadillo Lacandiwa de Leon, who says DJ crews not only helped promote the party scene, but they also created an important cultural space that became pivotal to the formation of Filipino-American youth culture, community, and identity. Growing from the 1970s, when mobile DJ crews were starting to develop in the Filipino-American community, Fil-Am youth culture continued to embrace hip-hop culture as a mode of expression and community building. Hip-hop music inspired Fil-Am youth to examine their cultural roots and develop their own cultural forms. And we can see that here as far as turntablism. Invisible Scratch Pickles, one of the most famous, well-known turntablists who are all Filipino, which also opened the doors for other DJs like Jennifer Lee, who's in the Philippines, who, plays at one of the, some of the biggest raves and outdoor concert venues in the world. And it also stems from this culture, from hip hop culture. We've embraced it when it comes to breakdancing and even emceeing. And while as Filipino and hip hop culture grew together, Fil-Am youth pushed hip hop with new dimensions, such as the advent of turntablism and the art of using the turntable as a musical instrument. And the irony about Filipinos is that Filipino-Americans are good at taking cultural materials and reordering them to find their own identity. And hip hop has been that vehicle for Fil-Ams to express themselves in a powerful way through the culture, as well as newer cultural forms. Now, while earlier generations of Filipinos in hip hop didn't always gravitate towards the role of emceeing front and center stage, today, a new wave of American rappers, Filipino descent, are making their voices heard in hip hop. These are artists like Guapdad 4000, Danny Brown, Sweetie, Manila Gray, who was actually from Vancouver, Canada. And while most are of mixed descent, they're proudly representing the Pinoy roots and helping redefine what staying connected to Filipino culture can look like today. So what is the impact? Filipinos are present across various aspects of urban and mainstream culture, from rap artists referencing Filipino culture in their lyrics to Issa Rae referring to Filipinos as the Black of Asians in her book. Now, even though the hit competition World of Dance was started here in Pomona, California, before it was even bought by Jennifer Lopez. And so Filipinos are now gravitating and being widely accepted by cultures around the world. Through fashion and design, we'll see artists like Jay-Z and Beyonce wearing clothing from Rude, who's a Filipino artist here in LA. Or even Carl Jan Cruz, who's taken the world by storm and having Nicki Minaj, Beyonce, J-Lo, Ariana Grande wearing some of his art. Even food, we're seeing this with food as well, in which, it's having a moment in multiple cities, both on both coasts, featuring innovative takes on traditional foods. The image that you're seeing here is from Barkada, which is a Filipino restaurant in Toronto, and they are demonstrating their take on what a Filipino fusion looks like. And this modern take on Filipino food lends itself to a highly adaptive, fusion-centric culture that the Philippines is known for. So what are some key takeaways of, a Filipino youth culture? Today, a new wave of Filipinos are making their mark on all aspects of pop culture. Gen Z and Millennial Filipino creative talent are a powerful force for creativity and a resource for cross-cultural connectivity. Until recently, most Westerners would struggle to even name a few Filipino foods, but Filipino-influenced food is trending across cities. The same is true for Filipino fashion designers who are now being embraced by global celebrities. Filipinos have now made an impact on every aspect of Western mainstream, and Filipino diaspora is making its mark on a global scale. And so there's no need to lump Filipinos with Asian anymore. Filipino culture can now stand on its own, and we've seen that throughout this presentation. So the world is now ready and primed to embrace Filipino culture in a more authentic way than ever before. And it's already happening with Olivia Rodrigo with her millions and millions of hits and her top charts. She has like 4 or 5 charts already on Billboard. We have SB19, who was nominated as the top social artist. We have Bella Poarch, one of the top, when her song came out, it was one of the highest streamed on Spotify as well as on TikTok. And because of that, she was also signed to, a major record label. Then, of course, we have her with her Grammy Awards, and Jo Koy now coming to mainstream television with his sitcom. So it's all happening right before our eyes. And so this is why MYX is here. MYX to us is a leading global content, media, and entertainment company highlighting the next generation of Filipino artists, creatives, and filmmakers. And MYX, the history of MYX is actually been around for over 20 years, mostly known in the Philippines as the #1 music channel. And its US counterpart here in the States started in about 2007. But today we've merged and we're relaunching MYX with a global mission of redefining and amplifying Filipino youth culture through the power of music, stories, and entertainment. So we've positioned ourselves to propel the contributions of Filipino youth culture to the forefront of today's global entertainment conversation by delivering premium content and providing a powerful platform for today's top creators alongside their collaborators. So MYX is part of a bigger ecosystem. It's part of ABS's global ecosystem, which includes our sister company, TFC, and more. And our reach is so spread out. We are in service of reaching over 10 million overseas Filipinos in addition to the Philippines. And with the success of TFC and the growing youth audience whom skew more multicultural and speak less Tagalog or any other dialects, this is one of the main reasons why we relaunched MYX. So what does our audience look like? Our primary audience is a second-gen Filipinos worldwide. They're likely to reside in the US, Asia, Europe, Middle East, and Canada. But we also have a secondary audience, which is kind of like a new general market who has more of a multicultural mindset. They're skewing younger, and this is kind of where our millennial and Gen Z group kind of mix. So our audience and what we are seeing is that although we are Filipino, although we're unapologetically Filipino, we do have this fusion sense of culture because of our friends, what we're exposed to, and who we hang out, the types of food we eat, etc. So that's why this is very important. And so let's talk about the platform that we've built. What we've built for the Filipino youth is what we call a ecosystem of multimedia touch points. It stems from TV, website, social media, and radio. And I'm going to break it down for you guys just a little bit more. So for TV, MYX TV is a global network available on our website, myx.global, and I Want TFC apps. It's available here in the US, Middle East, and Guam, and the channel is in 20 million homes via cable and satellite. And it's also available nationwide on Sky Cable. In the Philippines as well, I'm sorry. And if you on our TV channel, you're going to find MYX original programs, but you'll also find them on OTT platforms like Amazon Prime, reaching over 150 million Prime members. Now, our website is our digital hub for all things MYX, including daily news, new music, original shows, and even live TV viewing. Our website reaches an average about 116,000 unique viewers per day. We've already exceeded 10 million unique views since we relaunched the site in November 2020, and it's consistently growing every single day. Our social media channels show that the strength that we have within our communities is extremely strong. Here, we pretty much have 7.5 million followers and growing on Facebook, 6.7 million followers on Twitter, 531,000 followers on Instagram, 1.4 million subscribers on YouTube. And as I mentioned, because of what is happening right now in our culture when it comes to our artists, our creators, exploding in mainstream media, these numbers are continually growing as we continue to engage with our audiences with short form media, contests, polls, news about what is happening in our community. And MYX Radio. So MYX Radio is on the Dash Radio platform. It's our online radio station where we feature today's freshest music from around the world, with 80% of the artists being Filipino, like Bruno Mars, Black Eyed Peas, Her, and more. And Mix airs on Dash Radio, which is similar to like a Sirius, that is available free online within over 50 platforms, smart speakers, connected cars, mobile, smart TVs, etc. And they have an audience base of 12 million active users, both in the US and in Canada. And right now on Mix Radio is experiencing currently a 5.4 million monthly listens each month. And last but not least, one thing we didn't really talk about is live streaming aspect. Mix also provides content on Kumu, which is the #1 live stream app for Filipinos across the globe. Basically, we allow our users to connect with celebrities. We provide Q&A shows, game shows, music concerts, anything that is thought-provoking for our audience. So now that you know a little bit more about Mix, I'm going to turn it over to Rosalind, who's going to talk about how we have collaborated with other brands and agencies in empowering our community.
Thank you, Marleno. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Can you see me as well? Well, first, I want to thank Marlena for that presentation. Before we continue, are there any questions? Make sure you type them up in the webinar or the Q&A chat, and we'll answer that next. What I want to talk about next is what we call our brand partners. I know a lot of you work at agencies or brands yourself, and we really call the people that we work with partners. Anybody that Mix aligns with, we want to make sure we're going into a partnership and there's an actual purpose. You know, Marleno and I really believe in having a purpose behind a brand and have worked in Filipino culture specifically and music in over 20 years. Like Marleno said, the Filipino culture is a perfect fusion of Latino, African, as well as Asian culture, just because of our historically, but also how we are raised here in the United States, as well as in Canada. So there's different ways that you can partner with Mix. It's via our platform, it's via events, as well as original content, which we can either produce or can get sponsored. Another way you can work with us is to book talent via influencers or artists for your campaign or your live events. And so next slide talks about some of our challenges that we face as a community. You know, let's be realistic for a second. This is why we want to work with partners and not just brands. Filipinos make up a large majority of those affected by COVID, with a high percentage in healthcare as well as essential workers. Secondly, mainstream media outlets lack content sharing diverse and AEPI or Filipino stories. There's also been a rise in Asian hate crime in all major cities. There's a lack of creative representation in TV, film, sports, and music. We've made a big headway. We've talked about a few of those, but there's still a lot of room for growth. Most importantly, because there's a lack of funding for Asian American or Filipino stories and creators in entertainment. Although we have a high population in both US and Canada, it's not represented on television or the stories that are funded. There's also a lack of offline opportunities for youth to celebrate and experience their youth culture to pass on, or their historic culture to pass on to generations. And lastly, there's a lack of brand awareness of community significance in our spending power, our influence, and our talent. You know, we've worked with a lot of the NBA teams, whether it's the LA Clippers and the Sacramento Kings, and they've always said when we sold out a Filipino Heritage Night, wow, we didn't understand the power of your community. And the more that we can have opportunities for that, the more that we sell out our stadiums, that we sell out products that our influencer pushings, or we sell out arenas that Joe Coy is performing, people will start to understand the influence of our community. And not just for Filipinos to other Filipinos. Mix was created to help create a global audience for Filipino creators. And the same way that BET was founded on creating content as well as events for everybody to consume. That's where Mix fits in. So where's the opportunity? There's a lot of opportunities to be our partner, to support branded programs like I'll talk about in a minute, like the McDonald's Feeding the Frontliners campaign, where we specifically supported the essential workers and families, as well as communicated to the world of our high percentage of healthcare. You'll see a lot of healthcare shows, a lot of healthcare commercials, COVID, but there's not a lot of representation of what's really happening in the hospitals, which is the Filipino community supporting them. You can work with us to support the growth of one of the largest youth entertainment platforms in the world, especially with the rise of Filipino music, culture, as you've seen with the growth of K-pop. MYX was the first to actually play K-pop in the United States. Next, you can sponsor editorial programs that promote cultural similarities and understanding differences, which is most important in the rise of Asian hate crime right now. You can also work with us to support youth news and content, highlighting stories of representation for inspiration and credibility. We are working with, and you can also help support, an entertainment fund dedicated to telling more AAPI stories that are fully staffed and created by AAP creators, as well as casted with AAPI actors and creatives. There's an opportunity to sponsor offline events that showcase the best in Filipino talent and culture and food to a multicultural audience, as you guys have seen maybe in past presentations with the Taste of Manila, or most recently, our celebration of Canada's Multiculturalism Day last week. And lastly, we encourage other brands to support the community via top media brands, not just ABS-CBN, but there's others that do exist within the AAPI community, but we'd love for you to join us with MYX and TFC. A program that I talked about before was the McDonald's Feeding the Frontliners campaign. And we partnered with McDonald's because we saw the high impact that COVID was having among the healthcare industry. We distributed over 200 free arch cards that were across different hospitals, as well as different communities, to help raise awareness of the impact that these leaders have been having in the space. We call them salamat meals, or thank you meals, and we look forward to continuing programs like this in the future, not just for the frontline workers, but the essential workers, the teachers, etc. What programs can we create to really help serve the underserved or represented communities that are really, really working in the field? We also partnered with Jollibee. Jollibee is the #1 franchise for Filipino fast food in the US and Canada, but they wanted to reach a new audience. So we partnered with them to distribute Jollibee food to artists and celebrities that were non-Filipino. So Grammy Award-winning artists, influencers, etc., got to bring Jollibee into their homes via Apple of the Black Eyed Peas, Pilo, Guapdad, etc., while celebrating the release of a new album. So we not only work with brands to highlight Filipinos, but we also work with the top Filipino creators to reach the multicultural audience, or the diverse or mixed audience. I mentioned briefly that we produce events through the pandemic. We took a small break and produced just virtual events like Toronto DJ Weekend, a virtual Twitch live stream where we had thousands of people tuning in to listen to new music, but also promoting Barcata Restaurant. And there's plenty of opportunity to also join for future virtual events like the All for One Canada Multiculturalism Day. Hopefully we bring back the Taste of Manila Toronto Food and Music Festival next year, but offline events are coming back. You know, we'll be producing another tour next year of NBA Heritage Nights, LA Clippers, Sacramento Kings, and we hope to walk into to do the Toronto Raptors, you know, with our friends over there at like Four Corners. So there's opportunity to join us on upcoming concerts, movie screenings, comedy shows, and more here in the US as well as Canada. And lastly, original content. We can either create original content with existing talent and influencers, or we can hire and book different influencers and talent based on the product, whether it's retail, CPG, etc. We can find the right influencers, whether Filipino or not, based on the different audience. We've worked with major film studios like Disney and Netflix to use the power and the platform of MYX to reach the Filipino or Asian American multicultural audience. For example, Finding Ohana was the #1 Netflix movie, a story about a Hawaiian heritage with a family based in New York that traveled back to Hawaii, as well as Raya and the Last Dragon. We also interviewed their top stars like Aquafina and Kelly Marie Tran on the MYX platform, creating original content and distributing it to our 1 million followers and subscribers. And lastly, Terese, you guys might have heard on Netflix. It's out now if you haven't seen it. It's a Filipino folklore series that MYX Linear partnered with to actually interview their talent as well as work with other influence to share. So here is our upcoming shows and events a calendar. I'll briefly go over some of them, but this is a way, again, that brands can partner with us. I think Marcel in the chat room just said Filipinos need to gain ownership of their content. They need to control the distribution of this content and directly profit from it. That means Filipino-owned labels, studios, and platforms, to name a few. Amen. That's why we're here. We definitely work with a lot of Filipino creatives that want control and distribution of their content, and we want to highlight those creators. Sample is some of our TV shows and our digital shows. First being a show called Making It in America, and we're looking to do another season called Making It in Canada. It's a multi-generational show talking about their parents' sacrifice and immigration to discovering how the second and third generation Filipino leaders, celebrities, and artists were able to thrive in their specific countries. We've interviewed Anthony, who's at Marvel, who helped design Groot for Marvel, or Loki, or any of these really great characters at Marvel. We also interviewed Chef Val, the executive chef of one of the top restaurants in LA, etc. GPS, you can discover what the youth is listening to, what they're eating, and what they're going to during their pastimes in various cities across the country, specifically where AAPI and Filipino are high index in major cities like LA, Houston, New York, Toronto, Vancouver, you name it. Under the Influence, it's specifically about a series about Filipinos and Asians being some of the most talented and followed on social media today. Marlena talked about Bella Porch, Leanne V, Bretman Rock, etc. All of these influencers have a multicultural audience and have some of the most followed audience, but how did they get there? We take a lift of the curtain and show you what's going on there. Of course, we're a music platform. We're the MTV of the Philippines, and we also discover new artists of Filipino talent across the world, not just the established ones like Her or Bruno Mars, but we also unveil and help new artists get discovered. Our Mixed News brand is a weekly hot list of what's happening for Filipinos in entertainment and mainstream that are touching the community, as well as community stories. And lastly, I talked briefly about it, but our live offline events and linear or digital tape programs. So all of our offline events, we take back and we run on our linear channel. Our linear channel, as Marleno mentioned, not only runs in the US and is available in other cities via our website, which you can Chromecast, but we're also available as a linear channel in the US, in Europe, as well as the Philippines. So Mixtape is the best in Filipino talent performing in intimate venues across the country. Our Joke Lang comedy showcase, you can experience the best in Filipino comedians. Our Mix Fest, which we're hoping to bring back in 2022, music festivals with food, film, and family. And lastly, the Filipino Heritage Night, celebrating Filipino culture with top sporting teams across the country. So last but not least, we really hope that we can partner with you in number one is just educating the brands that we work with, the agencies that we work with, on the power of the Filipino community and its effect on the overall multicultural society. Please contact us if you have any questions just on either we can send you our IQ report specifically about the audience, or just upcoming programs that we can work with. And again, Joycelyn, thank you so much for having us a part of this. And we welcome any questions as well about the platform.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marleno and Roslyn. We are now going to open up the floor for questions. We had some great comments earlier. And I did have one from my team. We can use that as a question to kick it off, Marleno and Roslyn. And I think the main question that we hear from brands is still this question about, is 5 million big enough? Is it like 5 million, 1 million in Canada, 5 million in the US compared to, let's say, the Hispanic market, seems small. So how would you respond to either that brand or potential partner who, can't get over, the number still being, let's say, smaller relative to other multicultural audiences in either market? Would you care to comment on how you might overcome or have a debate with that partner? In a nice way, of course.
Sure, Marlena, did you want to go? You might want me to take it.
You can go first.
Okay, so what I mentioned as well, Filipinos, as you know, are a fusion culture. So historically, we have African, Asian, as well as Latino roots, and we are very well connected within, especially the second generation, to not just Filipinos, but to other Filipinos. So although you might be reaching, we might be highlighting the different creators, you're reaching a multicultural audience, as well as all of the artists and the influencers that we work with already have a multicultural audience. So you're not just tapping into the 5 million, you're actually tapping into the whole millennial and Gen Z community. And of course, music is universal. We have fans from all over the world of every color. Filipinos also are every color, but of every ethnicity, just being fans of music, of film, of the content that we're creating. So again, working with us is not just tapping into that to the Filipino audience, but it's actually a gateway into the influential world of Filipinos into a multicultural society, or generation mix, as we like to call them.
And I would also use that number as a baseline, right? Because 5 million it's a pretty large number. Is it big enough? We don't, it's hard to decipher. But if you look at our culture as a whole, we are a very social culture. We are a culture that, if you go to a Filipino party, you're going to get asked 4 or 5 times to eat before you leave, right? But in addition to that, I mean, like like Rod said, we're very well connected within our communities. I'll give you an example. When we went into this pandemic, Twitch became this platform in which all the DJs can start going on and playing to their audiences. And what we saw was the Filipinos were one of the first group to lead this and start really capitalizing and bringing their audiences there. And so as someone who was also, being a part of this, what I would see there is not only did you see Filipinos, but you saw an array of different ethnicities in this room all together because of the music and because of what the DJ was playing. So again, we're a very social community. We share, we teach, we explode. It's kind of like that thing. We take what is mainstream and we make it our own, because that's wired in our DNA as far as creating our own voice, creating our own identity. So we take all these things and we make it our own, and we expand and explode on that. So that's kind of what I would say about that. Is not only look at the numbers, but also really look at the psychographic data that is enabling our community to do what it's doing. I mean, how many artists do we have right now that have exploded without being in mainstream radio? So I think, again, it has to do with our community and the way that we engage and communicate with each other.
Marcel brought up something really great in the chat. It's not all about buying power. How rich is this market segment? You can have the largest population, that's true, in the United States, but are they really spending on entertainment? Are they packing movie theaters? Are they, and we know that. It's hard to tell when it's a multicultural artist or film, but when it's specifically our own and we show the numbers, like for example, Filipino Heritage Night or Joe Coy or Bruno Mars, you can see the buying power. So that's why we're trying to increase that visibility, so that, when I worked with the NBA LA Clippers, again, they looked at the numbers and they said, wow, we didn't understand. And you can look into the stands. You guys have been to Toronto, Filipino Heritage Night as well. You can see the numbers that we bring in. So I think it's, that's definitely a big point. It's not just the size of the audience, but it's what are they doing with their numbers and how are they activating?
I love it. And thank you, Marcel, for those amazing comments. What I take away the most, Rosalind and Marlino, is generation mix. The idea that it's bigger than the Filipino community and that it represents this gateway to more than what we maybe have come into this webinar thinking. It's about how to reach the Filipino audience, but it's really about reaching the millennial audience through the power of Filipino creators, generation mix. And I really believe this is the future of multicultural marketing in North America, where it won't be, by ethnic lines, it'll be through passion points like Generation Mix have represented in your presentation today. Passion points of music, of culture, of food, those things that bind us, not necessarily, through, where we were born, or what language we speak. It goes way beyond that. And I really thank you so much for what you've brought to the table. I do see maybe one more question that we'd love to throw over to you. The question reads that the Filipino market is young and brand equity could possibly build over a generation's timeline. So I think it's more of a comment, but Can you talk a little bit more about your perspective on the Filipino market being young and how you see it evolving, let's say from one generation to the next?
Yeah, I mean, what we've seen, in the recent years, especially working with a lot of college students, and I know from my own family, you guys might know as well, if any of you guys are from immigrant households, is that we came from a generation of assimilation. My mom moved here and she refused to speak Filipino or Tagalog in the house in fear that we wouldn't be perceived as American. And I think now that this next generation is coming and there's a Black Lives Matter movement, there's a Stop Asian Hate, the youth now more than ever is looking for representation, of looking for diversity, and with that comes identifying with their own culture and being proud to. And then most of us, when we become parents, that's when we rethink of how we raise our kids and what are we telling them, what food are they eating. So we're seeing a resurgence in just celebrating culture, and not just Filipinos. We see all other cultures doing it, and people are eating sushi on Mondays, tacos on Tuesday, lumpia on Wednesdays. This is Generation Mix, and it's a celebration of culture. And I only see that amplifying with years to come. And all of the major companies from Apple to Netflix, et cetera, are also celebrating diversity. I think we really need to champion and come together in order to have that also happen and that movement to happen, and not really shy back and be unapologetic and claim our culture and what we've been able to contribute and help that shine light. People should order lumpia like they order ramen, like it's coming, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited for the youth just being excited about their own culture, whatever it is.
And that's an aspect of the youth culture right now that I think is very apparent, is that they are looking at their roots and they are discovering it earlier than, like a Gen Z like myself. I'm a Generation X. So, I discovered Filipino culture in college, going to MIT and watching Jose Rizal's movie for the first time. It blew my mind just to even think of, what was I missing? Like I never knew any of this stuff. And so then I made it a point to then rediscover my roots and then take that on and then talk about it with other Filipino youth. And I can tell you just from a psychographic perspective, I was just interviewing a Filipino artist last night. She's 22. She's from Ireland. One of the questions I asked her was, what does it mean being a Filipino artist to you right now? And she unapologetically said, I am proud to be Filipino. I make it a point that in my songs, I do it bilingual, English and Tagalog, because I want people to see and understand where I come from. And I want to share that with the world. And I've seen this with so many different artists today. So it is happening. This is the culture that we are seeing is happening and exploding. And it's because they're proud and they want to, expand on that and explode it.
And that comes from an area, specifically in music. I worked in music. There wasn't a lot of Filipino artists at the time, and that's why, I mentioned when I went to the Philippines, it actually changed it. But artists like Bruno Mars, they were told not to talk about their ethnicity in fear that it won't be marketable. But now, there's artists like her that are talking in variety stories, and Sweetie getting interviewed for Vogue, and specifically about their Filipino culture, because a lot of people are wondering, like, we're watching the Grammys, but why are 3 or 4 of these artists Filipino? There's something that's happening there that's in the water. So, we're really excited of the youth just being excited to be proud of who they are. But at the same time, companies and content, content funders being able to support those creators. The reason why we haven't grown as big as K-pop or as big as these things, because we don't have the funding and we don't have the sponsorship, but that's going to change, in the near future. And with that comes with visibility comes credibility.
And then one more comment, and then we can get into Jolivet's question. But to expand on the brand equity building over a generation's lifetime, I would almost disagree, because it's already happening. I mean, if you look at like kind of the slide that I showed a little bit earlier, you have Olivia Rodrigo, you have Jo Koy, you have her. You have a lot more Filipinos in the spotlight right now in mainstream conversation. And so what that means is now when more people start to identify with them as Filipinos, that's just going to amplify, the proudness of our culture even more. Because again, I mean, for me, never to this day would I ever thought I would ever see a Filipino sitcom on a network like NBC.
Yeah.
Or it's ABC, right? I think, I forget.
ABC.
ABC. So again, it's it may seem like it's going to take a lifetime, but I'll be honest, it is happening right now, right in front of us. And so we need to really take advantage of what is happening in our society right now.
That's
And
amazing.
Jolivette
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Russ.
No, I was going to just comment on the question that was just brought up as well. Jolivette mentioned MYX reaches a global audience. Just interested how Canadian market responds to MYX initiatives. I mean, we've been wanting to go to Canada. We've been waiting for the the green light from with all the COVID restrictions, but we really understand and see the potential in the audience. You know, when we were there for Taste of Manila, I think they said over 100,000 people were there. It felt like that. You know, we helped curate a stage from artists from the Philippines as well as here, and thousands of people came out. You know, thousands of people watched Canadian Multiculturalism Day. So all of our MYX initiatives are really hitting home, I think, for the youth in Canada, because Canada is a step ahead in terms of celebrating diversity, you know, and celebrating, you know, immigration and welcoming that as well. So I think that's just a fast market for us to grow in, and we want to just run in there and do as much as possible. We're seeing the artists like Manila Gray being celebrated, but just it's one of our top 10 countries that's already on the platform, so it's going to grow as time grows.
And even from the underground aspect of Canada and Filipino artists, I mean, they're starting to flourish as well. There's a lot of underground Filipino artists that are starting to come up. I mean, even what's happening right now, there's a small group out there who've started a Phil Camp music organization where they just celebrated their first Filipino hip hop rap awards. And this is out of Canada. So this is already brewing. It's already happening in Canada, where the youth is starting to, again, make their voices be heard. They're starting to create things. We're seeing it with artists like John Concepcion, August Rigo. I mean, you know, there's so many Canadians right now that are doing it. And so I think as a response to that, I would say, number one, support it. Be a part of the community. It would be the biggest thing that you can do. You know, you can team up with organizations like us, where we are, you know, working to reach a Canadian youth Filipino market as well. And so, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think the number one thing is really understand like what's happening within the youth, especially in Canada.
You got it. Great questions, everyone. And we had representation, just so you know, Marlino and Rosalind from Washington State, from Denver, from Costa Rica, I thought I saw, as well as Winnipeg and Vancouver.
I can never say it right. Mississauga.
You got it. Come up to Mississauga and we'll take you to Jollibee when you're up here, Rosalind. But like, we had great representation. So I just really want to say thank you to all the participants. We had amazing participants, and really thank you to you so much, Marlino and Rosalind, for your leadership, for your inspiration. And this won't be the last time we talk about Generation MYX, I'm sure. But thank you for this wonderful intro, and can't wait to follow and see the amazing work that you continue to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
All right, we'll play you out, and have a great day, everyone. A recording of this will be mailed out and sent out to all participants. And with that, we'll say thank you, merci, gracias, and maraming salamat to all of you. All the best.
Ingat.
Bye, everyone. Ingat. Thank you.